Hi, Banu. Welcome to Resolve. I thank you so much for you taking time out and then sharing your experience with us. I'm hoping that your professional experience would help a lot of students and people in the field. Uh, so, could you begin by introducing yourself?
Hi, I'm Bhanu. I'm a journalist and I work with an organization called Urwani Foundation, where I currently serve as the engagement manager. My background in journalism is largely in environmental journalism, which has always been my area of interest. But I now work in a slightly more diverse and different field, which I'll talk about more maybe. Um, my journey in journalism started with I've always been interested in writing. That's something that I love to do, and I still love writing. And I was also always very interested in nature and environment, even as a child. I um, and there was this was a very I had a very clear idea right from my school years that I wanted to do something in the environment space, even though I wasn't entirely sure of what. But and I had very lofty dreams of like doing something that would make a difference, so to speak. But the environment was something that I was always very interested in. Um, so when I got to my undergraduate degree, I chose to do an undergraduate degree in communication studies from Mount Carmel College in Bangalore. And that is really where I honed my writing skills and my communication skills and sort of started on this path of being in the media journalism world, so to speak. Um, and it was a really wonderful time. It was a really wonderful experience because we learned a lot, especially about writing. And we had a really, when I look back at it now, I realize it was a really rigorous um, 3 years where we learned to write for every form of media that existed 10, 15 years ago. So we didn't have social media obviously back then, but we learned to write for television, we learned to write for radio, we learned to write for print, we learned to just write to sort of loosen our language skills and to become free of an inhibition. And I think that really shaped and made me comfortable with writing, which really opened a lot of doors for me, even in my future professional journey, educational and professional journey. And throughout the time, I had some really wonderful teachers, and one of them, Kala Krishnan, who's a writer herself. She still teaches at Mount Carmel. She was really instrumental both in helping me hone my writing skills, but also was extremely encouraging of the ideas that I had around doing something around environment and writing and maybe getting into environmental journalism. After my undergraduate degree, I took a break. I mean, for a year or so, I used to freelance with a very new website called Citizen Matters, which was then in 2008. It was the first year of its formation, and it was founded by two people from the IT sector who were just tired of seeing their city, that is Bangalore, broken in many ways and many local issues ignored by the media in general. And they wanted to find ways to highlight local urban issues. And I used to freelance with them sometimes. And I also worked with a documentary filmmaker for a short while. Both, again, really uh, helped me learn to write, to report, to learn a little bit about the back end processes and other things like filmmaking, documentary filmmaking, and to understand environmental issues more because in both cases, I tried to understand environmental issues a lot. And then I did a master's from the National Center for Biological Sciences. My master's degree was in wildlife biology and conservation. Um, Oh, I forgot to mention this, but before that, I also did an internship with an organization called Arosha, which works on elephant conservation in the Bannerghatta National Park in Bangalore. So again, that was an amazing experience, a transformative experience, because I got to visit and live in their field station in the Bannerghatta forest, which was my first real experience of anything like that, anything in the wild. And that really shaped my interest in biodiversity and wildlife, and also more uh, a deeper understanding of that space. And so then I did a master's, an MSc in wildlife biology and conservation. um, so I've had a very long and like meandering journey sometimes, but I, after my master's degree, for my master's dissertation, I worked on mangrove forests in the Andaman Islands. I looked at how fish used mangrove forests in the Andaman Islands. I then worked for a couple of more years in that same region on mangrove forests and how they were being shaped, mangrove vegetation, how it was shaped by the 2004 tsunami. So after 2 3 years of research, I worked for a bit with a conservation NGO, which is located here, Nature Conservation Foundation. I worked with their Eastern Himalaya program. And I got to see one of their conservation projects, looking at where they try to protect hornbills in Arunachal. Again, a really interesting and amazing experience. Somewhere around 2017 or 18, I decided to go back to writing and journalism, and I decided I didn't want to be in academia or research, but I wanted to be more in the sort of communication and media related fields, but talking about all of these things: environment, biodiversity, sustainability, all of these things. So I went back, I started freelancing as an environmental journalist. I wrote for a bunch of outlets, including Manga Bay India, The Wire, um, and yeah. And then in 2022, around end of 2022, I think, I joined Citizen Matters, which is the civic media outlet of my organization where I work, Urani Foundation. So I joined as a reporter for Bangalore. And yeah, and then from there, I've now moved on to managing the outreach and engagement and multimedia content for the entire organization. Um, and yeah, that's sort of my meandering journey. Yeah,
You mentioned that in college you
it
were
was a
pursuing journalism and
yeah,
you started to do your master's in a completely different field.
yeah.
So why the switch?
So I never saw these things as a switch. I was interested in environment, and I was interested in journalism and media. So um, when I got a chance to, and I was interested in biodiversity and wildlife. So to me, it all seemed very natural. And it's just that I was also very lucky that this course came up. It was quite a new thing back then. Um, I was part of the fourth batch. So it was a fairly new course back then, although now it's really well known and respected in the wildlife field. What was really amazing was that they opened it up for people from all backgrounds, because actually, if you look at the history of wildlife biologists in India, many of the first pioneer wildlife biologists are actually not from a biology background, not all of them. Many of them are engineers. And if you look at the um, sort of wildlife biology conservation field in India, even today, you see people from diverse backgrounds. And today, in fact, it's opened up. Even more people come in wanting to do nature education. They come in with an interest in art and nature and wildlife. So this course was really great because it allowed people from different backgrounds. So in my batch, there were people from an arts background like me, but there were also engineers. There were people from a biology background. And yeah, the recognition was that many people have this passion or this interest in wildlife, but not necessarily that they know about careers or options right from an undergraduate level. And often at an undergraduate level, there is some pressure to do certain things for many people. I didn't personally have that pressure, but many people are, expected to do engineering, for instance. So, but that shouldn't stop them from pursuing a career. That was the goal behind it. For me, I felt it was natural. I didn't feel it was a switch so much as, this was an area of interest, and I needed to learn more about it. And so I applied, I got in it.
From your experience, for any of the viewers who is either pursuing or working in a different field but is interested in wildlife biology, how would you suggest that they go about it?
I don't know of like a particular forum online or something right now, but it is more, there are more, there is a lot more information out there right now. So people should certainly be looking up organizations on social media or on even just Googling them. But pretty much everybody is on Instagram, for instance, now. So if you're interested in a master's degree in wildlife biology, then in India, the two best known master's programs are in the National Center for Biological Sciences, which is what I did, and the Wildlife Institute of India. But there are many other organizations that have come up with wildlife programs, many institutes, universities in other cities as well. A3, which is also located in North Bangalore, has a program in wildlife conservation and policy specifically. So it's not so much about the science, but more about the policy and practices of wildlife conservation. So there are many opportunities out there. I think you have to maybe look for people or organizations that are there on all these online platforms, follow their work, follow different programs and their work a little bit, read up about their work, and read things that researchers, scientists have written. Especially now, there are a lot of people writing a lot of things. There's a lot of books to read and a lot of articles out there. I think all of that will give you a sense of what sort of work happens, and also open up opportunities for ways to engage, say internships, volunteer work, if you're able to do that. um, I wouldn't advise that anybody just go from an undergraduate degree to a master's degree in wildlife without any experience, because it can seem like a really exciting and glamorous field, but it's not necessarily. It can be very difficult if you're doing field biology. It means you're spending months away from any kind of comfort, home, city life often. So, depending on what you're doing, academia and science can be very different. A lot of the times that you're actually not sitting in a forest and watching a tiger or something, right? So, it's really important to engage with people who already do the work, maybe get some hands on training experience if you can get it through internships or through volunteering and stuff, and then decide whether this is an area of interest and you want to, commit more time, say, studying in a master's program or even doing a PhD further. So, yeah, I think you can pretty much find all organizations on something like Instagram.
So the other follow-up question is, what were some of the challenges that you faced on the field?
So, like I said, one of the toughest, like where I did most of my field work was in Andaman and Nicobar Islands. So, in the Andaman Islands, which is my field experience is a relatively more comfortable one to what many of my friends and colleagues at that time would have experienced. But I think one of the things is that you're away from home a lot, right? You are, so I lived in a field station. There were many other researchers. So I had a lot more company. But when I worked in 2012, for instance, I don't think I even had a smartphone at that time, and internet and mobile connectivity in Andamans was not great. So the only way you could talk to somebody was you have to go out of the field station onto the main road and stand in one particular spot, and you'll get some signal and you can speak. So, like, if you have a partner, you're in a new relationship, like I was at that time, it's really hard to talk to your boyfriend easily. Very hard to. There was a period when I was in the field when we were expected to coordinate things like our wedding preparations, and that was great. I was very happy to not have enough signal to do that. But you have all these little things where you can't necessarily communicate with people easily that you want to. You don't always have space. So a lot of times, depending on what sort of work you're doing, you may be camping in a forest, and that can be fun for a week. But if you're doing that for 6 months, or if you're doing that for even 2, 3 months, and say you're always with a field assistant or somebody who's, you might get along great, but you don't have your own space. So all of these things can add up and build difficulty. I think for me, yeah, communicating in those early months would have been a challenge because, like I said, it you nowadays Andamans has very good internet. For example, that time it didn't, so it was a real challenge. Even I was even applying for some PhD positions that time, so you'd have to schedule calls and interviews at a particular time in the night, as late at night as possible, so that most of the island is not using any signal. And then you go to the highest point in our field station and hope that your internet's going to work for your interview with some university person in the US. So things like that were a challenge, and I can imagine it must have been so much harder for people living there. I mean, for the islanders who would have also wanted to have these opportunities. Yeah, I think that there's a certain amount of loneliness, like you lose your space. That is always a challenge. But a lot of great experiences as well, of course, with wildlife. I learned to dive during that period. I learned to really explore mangrove forests in a way that I think very few people get that kind of chance. Really learned to appreciate a lot of wildlife, which is not, big mammals, but just small things, frogs, geckos, crabs, fish. So yeah, it was an adventure for sure. Yeah.
Were there any fears as a woman traveling and staying away from family for long periods?
No, because I had gone there as part of our master's program first. For the first time, we had an entire marine biology course there. So I knew the area in and out, and I got to explore it in a very safe way the first time. And it was a field station, so that's not a luxury many women have. So certainly, I had a much easier time. I did have some challenges with one of my field assistants when I was working there, and some inappropriate behavior from his end that I had to navigate. It was very tricky because you don't want to anger somebody you're working with, or upset somebody you're working with, or cause any problems for them also. Or that's what you think when you're young, especially. You think that you don't want to cause problems while doing these things. And also, as women, as girls, you get told to um toughen up. Like, if you start saying, oh, I have a problem in field, then you worry that people will think you can't handle the field. So you kind of, so I had this one field assistant who was kind of inappropriate. But eventually I managed to speak about it with my advisor, who was wonderful about it, and he handled the whole situation for me, and that really helped. But I've definitely heard of many women with much harder situations. I think it's a lot easier, a little bit easier now because you have more connectivity. And also, I think the mindset has shifted a lot. Also, young women now are, I think, much more aware that this is not okay in a workplace and what they should do or how to speak up. So there is that. which I think we didn't have back then. We didn't really have, say, training to know what is okay, what is not, and how we should handle it if something happens to us, and for also for men in the field, like how they should handle so that they are not coming off as inappropriate. So we didn't have that as much. Um, but yeah, for me, this, except for this one incident, I think I had a pretty charmed life. Yeah.
Based on your personal experience, if any of the viewers, any female students are going out there and are in a similar situation, how would you suggest that they deal with this situation?
I think it's really important to, first of all, say, confide with somebody, anybody. It can be a friend, a peer, maybe somebody else who's in the field with you. Even if I mean, confide in somebody that you're comfortable with, or say a friend or family member back somewhere else. It's really important to communicate and tell somebody. Um, if it's a really risky situation, then don't be afraid to. I mean, uh, don't think that you should stay in a risky situation for your career. That it's not worth it. You should remove yourself from that situation, and then if it's possible, you should report um, the situation. But I also think that the onus is not on, like, it should not be about, what should young women do to handle the situation. It's the responsibility of any organization putting anybody, a woman or man, anybody in a field situation, that you should have a good sense of what are the risks, and you should be willing to support your staff no matter what, if they are facing anything. And when it comes to women, it is the fact that women are most likely to face, say, sexual harassment or any kind of gender based harassment. So it is necessary to be aware of that and be prepared with a plan for what to do if something like that happens to your staff. Which includes also telling them that, hey, if you face some problem, these are the people you need to call immediately. This is the steps we are going to take. It is not on you to protect yourself entirely, but as an organization, anybody has the. So that includes if a researcher comes to the country and hires an intern to go work in the field, it's that researcher's job to make sure that there is a safe environment for that person working. So yeah, I think it's the employers, this one. And there are a lot of um, there's an account called Women of the Wild on Instagram, which actually they've highlighted many organizations related to wildlife and conservation, where women have faced um, varying degrees of problems, harassment, or they've outed many I don't know, many people, the pattern of sexual violence, for instance, who are well known people who it shocked a lot of members when it came out. So if anybody's in the field and you're like, then you should follow Women of the Wild and maybe even like familiarize yourself with some of these organizations, so at least you know what is out there. But yeah, overall it's the job of the employer. I'm not for like giving any great tips to women, because I think you do whatever can be done in that situation, but it's on the employers entirely to make sure that there's a safe space for them.
Also, if an organization does not have these protocols in place that you just mentioned, uh, would it make sense for the employee to ask the organization before leaving in hand itself, if I'm in a situation like this, what do I do?
Yeah, certainly. But I can imagine a lot of, especially if you're young, you're starting out in this field, I think many people will not be comfortable asking that sort of a question. I know for a fact that I wouldn't have been comfortable. Even, first of all, I wouldn't even think like that. May not be able to anticipate that, especially when you're 20, 21, you're not thinking so much about. But even if I was able to, I think I would hesitate to ask. Because you don't want to come across as problematic, right? You don't want to come across as somebody who is scared to go to the field or scared of being in a certain environment. Especially as women, we're expected to prove that we are tough and we can handle being out on the field and we are hardy and stuff. So I can't imagine. So I mean, yes, you should do it if you feel you're able to, but I can also completely understand that many people will not be able to, especially younger women. I think it's for uh, the organization and senior employees, both men, women, whatever gender you are from. It is for people who are in senior positions to identify. It's almost, I mean, it's even legally not accepted anymore for any organization to not have gender and sexual harassment rules. So you're supposed to have a training session every year. You're supposed to have updated guidelines. You're supposed to have a committee that is able to look into any issues that crop up in an organization. So it's absolutely the onus is on senior leadership and senior members of any organization to ensure that before anyone is sent on the field, they are briefed about how to be safe, but also what to do if they are in an unsafe situation, which can be not just sexual harassment, right? It can be anything. There should be a very clear set of guidelines that you give, especially junior employees.